what a wonderful world.
Welcome to our last report on See and Learn on Saba 2012. Expert Nellie Pelisson, whose work consists of monitoring and researching whales, dolphins and other cetaceans in the Caribbean, gave her first presentation to the children at Child Focus. Nellie also had the chance to give an evening presentation to the public where she talked about whale sounds.
And what is very exciting is when they arrive at the beginning in warm water, it's around January, then you will have a new song every year. And the next year, that will be another song. And the same group is changing in the same time their song. So that's really amazing because if you can give me a song, I can give you, if I haven't trained to, I can give you where it's come from. So you have some groups here, you have some other groups here, and each time the song is completely different.
Earlier in the week, I had the chance to speak to Ashwin Eglin. Ashwin is a marine biologist whose area of expertise is sargassum weed. I asked him to explain more about these floating beds of algae.
It's a brown seaweed, so it's not a plant, it's a seaweed. And it's mainly coming from the Sargasso Sea, which is the huge area around Bermuda. It's a huge gyre where oceanographic currents kind of converge. And it's a big washing machine for all kind of drift material of the ocean. And sargassum, the species that occur here, are basically the main occupants of that area.
How come sometimes we see a lot of sargassum weed and sometimes we see hardly any?
Well, the sargassum gets trapped in this huge gyre around Bermuda. But this gyre is not only produced by the currents but also by winds, for example. So if atmospheric conditions are changed, this gyre can also be slightly changed. And then part of this the gyre is moving southwards. Sometimes that can mean that this material ends up on the coast of Portugal or the Azores or Africa. And in some cases it fills up the northern Caribbean islands.
Are there any environmental effects when there's a big algal bloom?
Well, I would say there is two aspects to this. The first is an extremely positive aspect. And that is that there is a huge amount of different organisms associated to this drift material. You can imagine that in the open ocean it's very difficult for a small organism to survive because there's nowhere to hide. So what you see is that as soon as this kind of material starts drifting, all kinds of small critters go through this material to hide and live. And the small critters attract bigger critters and they attract fish. And so this is partly why it's extremely good for fishermen, because there is large, really game fish that is attracted to the small food that is associated to this material. So there is a very important biological value of this material. Second important biological role of this material is that it basically redistributes all the young animals. So all the young fish that is associated to this, they catch up in this huge gyre. They come from all over the place, and then by these kind of blooms that you have on the islands, these young organisms get redistributed along the islands. So that basically means that it's a source for new animals on the reefs, in the water column. So this is a very, very important positive aspect of the sargassum.
Is this system threatened by any human activity, as far as you know?
No, in general I think there is not many threats that are directly related to this. There are some threats related to the organisms. So one of the biggest risks, for example, is other drift material. So there we talk mainly now worldwide about plastics, because all the drift material gets caught up in this giant gyre, so that means also the plastic is there. Which means, for example, that the huge amount of young sea turtles that go to these areas to feed, they also will eat and ingest plastic. So in the stomach content of these turtles you usually find 10 to 20% plastics, from which lots of them die. Then the second thing is that, of course, when there are oil spills, for example with the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, all that material by the action of the sea converges with the algae material. And so the whole function of this material, it gets trapped in the oil, and so everything dies basically. So a huge impact is there of oil spills.
Martin de Graaf is a consultant for the Dutch government on effective fishery techniques. He's here doing research with students from Holland to set the baseline for any future fishery policy on the Saba bank.
The role we have here is in a way to facilitate and advise. We're not here to go and tell the government what to do, luckily, because that's actually the difficult job. Luckily we can steer away from that. Pretty much our job is to collect basic information, put that on the table, so then the stakeholders and the managers can actually sit around the table, and in that case I mean local government, representatives of fishermen, representatives of environment organizations, representatives of the tourist branch. So when they actually sit around the table and have to decide upon what kind of management actions do we want to take, what kind of regulations do we want to introduce, what kind of regulations do we want to enforce, or actually even trying to decide what are our purely our management objectives, that they have something solid to base their discussions on instead of all hearsay. Basically you have two types of fisheries here. One is the lobster trap fishery. Pretty much all the boats, all the licenses do fish for lobster. And then you have a snapper trap fishery, but that's only, let's say roughly half the boats fish for redfish. So half the boats only lobster, the other half of the boats do lobster and redfish trapping. Because the nice thing about the Saban fishery is that it's in a way it's small scale. It's only there's only 10 licenses. Of those 10 licenses, I think at the moment there's only 9 or 8 boats actually operational. And what they do is they all leave at a certain time in the morning, quite regular, and actually come back during the afternoon. Again, most fishermen always come back on the clock. So pretty much what we're doing at the moment is we just sit in the harbour, and as soon as a boat comes in, we do what we call port sampling. So we either conduct what we call a short interview, where we just quickly ask the fisherman where he has been fishing. We ask him about the catch, we ask him how much gear, what type of gear he's used, the fishing area. But we also ask him some extra questions about have you seen whales or dolphins, just to collect some extra information. And we ask him if they have seen any lionfish. And we also ask him about, for example, buried females, which they're supposed to return, so that information you don't get, because they don't bring in the buried females. But if you want to know something about buried female lobster, we just get that through interviewing the fishermen. And we also ask him about how many undersized lobsters they had. Again, because you don't get that information because they don't land undersized lobsters. But we want to get an idea about how many juveniles are out there. So actually, just having this short interview provides a lot of basic information on the fishery. And then sometimes we ask the fishermen to spend a little bit more time with us. Like a short interview literally only takes a minute or two. And then every now and again, we don't do that every fishing trip, we actually measure through the catch of the fishermen. So either with the lobsters, we measure the length and determine the sex. We also look at the fish that's being landed. Again, we look at species and at size. And the same thing with the snapper fishery here. Again, every now and again we look at species composition and length frequency.
As part of See and Learn, Martin also visited the schools, where he shared his passion for fish with the kids.
If you do one study here, the next guy that rocks up and does a study there.
He also shared his preliminary results with the general public during an evening presentation at Scout's Place.
To make that curve.
Another expert who was very busy during his See and Learn visit was Paul Sickle. Paul specialized in fish parasites and used this opportunity to further his research.
So we're taking a blood sample to ultimately look for a parasite called a hemogregarine, a blood parasite called the hemogregarine, which is similar to malaria. It's closely related to malaria, actually. And we're sampling as many species of fish from as many locations in the Caribbean as we can to see which species actually have this parasite and which locations have the parasite.
Are you doing this all by yourself, or are you getting help from other people?
No, I have lots of help actually. I couldn't do any of this research by myself, and so to get the fish, we collect a lot of it ourselves on snorkel or on diving, but we also get a lot of help from the fishermen because they're able to get a lot of the species that live in deeper water or bigger individuals that are harder for us to get. So we're working with fishermen here and in the Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico who provide us with a lot of our samples or fish.
Why are you doing this research specifically on Saba?
Well, because it's one of the few places in the Caribbean that's in pretty good shape in terms of the biodiversity. In fact, when we wrote our proposal, we wrote Saba in specifically as a fairly pristine site compared to some of our other sites. So we can get a lot of species of fish here easily that we can't get elsewhere because elsewhere they're fished out or the habitat's damaged. So we get a lot more diversity here, a lot more abundance here than elsewhere. So it's a really great site for that.
So finally, Paul, why did you name your parasite after Bob Marley?
Well, a variety of reasons. First of all, I'm a huge Bob Marley fan. Second of all, when we're doing our research in the lab, we often have Bob Marley music playing. Third, because this parasite, this isopod, seems to be so widespread around the Caribbean, there's really nothing more Caribbean, in my view, than Bob Marley. When you think about the Caribbean, most people think about Bob Marley, and he's sort of pan-Caribbean, and actually he's global. So something that's widespread in the Caribbean seems to fit Bob Marley's influence. Right. So we had a chance to honor him by naming a species after him.
One of the ongoing projects during See and Learn 2012 is the mural at Fort Bay. Stacy and Joan have made a lot of progress over the past month with the help of school children and the community as a whole.
Well, we've had a very enjoyable few weeks with children of all ages helping us paint the mural, as well as visitors and members of the community. We really look forward to the unveiling of the mural on Saba Day and Phase 2, which will take place next year.
We've gotten a lot more done than we thought we would, and thanks to all the volunteers in Saba and the students that have come and helped, we're almost finished, maybe about 75% finished. We've got a lot of the ocean scene to go yet, a lot of things on land that have already been done, and we're just putting the finishing touches here on Welcome to Saba to the Captain Leo AI Chance Pier. We're very proud of the work that everyone has done on the mural.
Visiting from neighboring island St. Bart's were iguana experts Michel Breu and Julien Lequelec, who came to survey the local iguana population.
In St. Bart's we've got a native iguana, originally from the Lesser Antilles, and we're trying to protect it. And what we did is to do a complete survey on this iguana, and this allowed us to convince the politics to protect it. And our main problem is that we've got an invasive species coming and fighting our local iguana. So in order to save our iguana, we did protect our local iguana and we did not protect the invasive species. So for the conservation, we're fighting the invasive species and we try to save our iguana by relocation on outer islands, for example. So all this work has been done with Michel Breu, who's next to me now, and is our scientist for this survey.
My work in this survey is to precise the problem of hybridization with the two species of iguana. We have the local endemics, and we have an invasive iguana coming from Central America and from South America. And these two species are able to reproduce together with fertile hybrids. And with time, the local species disappeared. We have this situation in Guadeloupe, in Les Saintes, for example. And one thing we want to do is to be sure that the black iguanas from Saba, from Montserrat, and also the horned iguanas from St. Lucia are really endemic subspecies or species. We have to look for that, and we try with morphology, with genetics, to precise all that points.
Yeah, actually we came to Saba in order to collect few samples of few black iguana. Like we did also, we went to St. Martin, we went to different islands to be able to compare the genetics of the iguana in the Caribbean and to figure out where the iguanas were coming from. And when we came to Saba in November 11th, thanks to the Saba Park and to Kai Wolf, we did realize that your iguana was pretty special. And potentially there is a subspecies to describe. And would be a good idea, we think, is to describe this species on Saba and to protect it because it's a native species of Saba.
The work to make this description is consists of genetics, and this genetics analysis allow us to precise that the iguana from Saba are very different from other iguanas. But I think we are able to breed with other iguanas from other islands. The iguanas from St. Martin, we know that they arrived at the beginning of this century with pet trade, and they invaded St. Martin, and then they go to Simbart, and in Simbart we have hybridization. Perhaps with our genetics results we think that the hybridization began more than 10 years ago.
And unfortunately, if we let things go like this, only one species will remain. The local iguana from Caribbean will disappear, and the iguana from South America, who's stronger, who's more aggressive, will take over on our local iguanas. So I think it's important to set up a regional network to be able to save the Caribbean species. And this is a very important objective for us.
So this is it for See and Learn on Saba 2012. I hope you had as much fun as I did and that I've managed to share my passion for science with you. Now let's all work together to keep Saba the unspoiled queen of the Caribbean.
I think to myself, what a wonderful